Hello and welcome to the Walking with Legends podcast. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and supporting the program, and I hope that you're gaining a bunch of new information and enjoying our content. If you could, please help us out by spreading the word via social media or word of mouth to your friends to help the program grow, and if you have any feedback, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, let us know by emailing us at walkwithlegends@gmail.com. We are currently in our Rivalries mini-series, which will continue for the next few weeks. Due to the overwhelming amount of information, stories, and history of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, we will actually be doing a Part 2 episode of that rivalry next week. So just a heads up that it's not a repeat episode of last week's, but it'll be all new content, just the same rivalry. Thanks for your patience last week as things got busy and we couldn't put up a new episode. But we'll continue to try to pump out new content each week. So again, thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed today's episode. One of the greatest aspects of professional sports is that it gives fans the opportunity to have passion while they root for their team. It seems like everything else in life is stripped away, even for a few hours, and all that matters is that their team gets that victory, and you can share that experience with friends and even strangers. But what if that passion for your team wasn't present just on Sunday afternoons, but all year round? And by rooting for your hometown team, that makes you despise your rival team. It seems like it's a common occurrence in sports, but for the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers franchises, it's the culmination of 100 years of animosity, hard-fought battles, and two of the founding members of the NFL. Since 1921, when they first played against one another, these two teams have had disdain for one another, fueled by hard-headed coaches, a slew of current and future Hall of Famers, and fan bases who love their team. It's one of, if not the greatest rivalry in the NFL today. Welcome to Walking with Legends, the podcast dedicated to telling the stories behind the most iconic athletes and teams in sports history and what made them become a legend. As we mentioned, the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers rivalry is the most historic and long-standing rivalry in the NFL, dating back to 1921. There are many factors to consider when you try to rationalize why these two franchises show animosity towards one another. For starters, Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Chicago, Illinois are separated by only 200 miles. Due to this close proximity, it means that the teams have had the opportunity to play against one another multiple times every season for decades, further adding fuel to the fire when controversies or close contests take place. But it also creates animosity amongst fans, as the close proximity causes divides among friends and families who choose to root for the, quote, wrong team instead of the hometown team. Another big factor is the mentality and way of life differences between the two cities. Chicago, Illinois is one of the biggest cities in the U.S. with almost 3 million residents, and boasts a very modern feel to the city, whereas Green Bay, Wisconsin represents more of a hometown feel, which is often reflected when thinking about Wisconsin. This distinction has been used by Bears fans to hurl insults and taunts towards Packers fans, most notoriously when the Chicago Bears won the 1985 Super Bowl. When the Bears won the Super Bowl, they began to taunt the Packers with a new nickname, Cheesehead. Instead of being upset at these taunts, the fans in the state of Wisconsin embraced this distinction, and a man named Ralph Bruno in 1987 showed up to a Milwaukee Brewers baseball game wearing a cheese-shaped hat made out of foam that he made from his mother's couch. Instead of making fun of the man, Brewers fans asked him to make them hats as well, which he started to manufacture and sell at Wisconsin sporting events. Today, the company has become a successful enterprise, and the cheesehead hat and culture, which was once used to be a taunt, is now embraced and celebrated at not just Green Bay Packers games, but Wisconsin sports events in general. The Chicago Bears actually started out as the Decatur Staleys in 1920, named after the owner A. E. Staley, who worked at a company in Decatur, Illinois, as a company team. The founder of the team, George Halas, was an integral part of the creation of the American Professional Football Association, and moved the team to Chicago the following year and changed the name of the team to the Bears. The team originally played their games at Wrigley Field, the longtime home of the Chicago Cubs baseball team, and right from the get-go experienced a great deal of success. The team won 3 championships in the first decade of the team, and became a greater force during the 40s when they became known as the Monsters of the Midway. These teams won an additional 4 championships during that decade, establishing the franchise as a force to be reckoned with. The Green Bay Packers, on the other hand, were started in 1919 by Earl Lambeau, an industrial worker who was given $500 for uniforms from his employer at the Indian Packing Company, only on the condition that the team would be named after the company. The Packers were originally an independent team until they joined the NFL in 1921. The team would experience little success in their first decade, but would go on to win their first title in 1929 with an undefeated season, repeating as champions the next 2 seasons. The 2 teams first played each other in the 1921 season, which was the year an infamous incident occurred between the 2 teams. George Halas, the owner of the Bears, requested that the Packers be expelled from the NFL because he wanted to prevent them from signing a particular player that he was interested in playing for his team. The Packers were in fact expelled from the league, and once the players signed with the Bears, Halas requested that the Packers be readmitted into the league, and they were granted readmission. In one of the earliest games in the rivalry, a Chicago Bears player actually broke the nose of a Green Bay Packer player during the game, and the rivalry intensified the following year when in 1924, Bears player Frank Haney and Packers player Tilly Voss were ejected from their game for fighting, becoming the first ever ejection of players in an NFL game. Like any good rivalry, there needs to be parity, where both teams always feel like they have an equal shot at defeating the other, and both experience a great deal of success, and this defined both the Packers and Bears organizations in the early years. In the first 25 years of the NFL, the 2 teams combined for 13 championships, which made every encounter between the 2 teams feel like an extraordinary affair. In 1941, shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which marked the beginning of World War II, the fans of both teams came out and supported their teams when they came together for the game, with an attendance of 41,000 people watching the hometown Bears defeat the Packers at Wrigley Field in Chicago in the divisional playoffs. A week later, the Bears advanced to play the New York Giants in the championship game, and that game only drew out 13,000 fans. This resonated throughout the country, the intensity of the rivalry, and just how much these Midwestern franchises cared about beating one another. Both franchises are known for their iconic stadiums, as the Chicago Bears play at Soldier Field and the Green Bay Packers play at Lambeau Field. However, the stories behind both of these stadiums actually are in part of interactions between their rivals. Due to the popularity of the rivalry, both teams were experiencing issues in seating all of the fans that wanted to attend games. One of the policies that were put into place when the NFL and AFL merged together was that stadium capacities had to seat at least 50,000 spectators, which was greater than the capacity of Wrigley Field, where the Bears had played for 50 years. This forced the Bears to sign a 3-year commitment with Soldier Field to play their games there, and although the stadium had been in place since 1924, the team didn't end up playing a game there until 1971, and has since become an iconic symbol to the city of Chicago. The Green Bay Packers, on the other hand, had a humorous and ironic beginning to Lambeau Field. In the 1950s, George Halas, the owner of the Chicago Bears, who had a long-standing disdain for the team as his rival, approached Green Bay city officials and told them if they didn't build a new stadium, they'd risk losing the team, as pressure was starting to rise that the team would be relocated to Milwaukee, as there wasn't a facility capable of housing the team and the rising needs in Green Bay. This prompted city officials to begin building a stadium, and by 1957, the stadium was completed and ready to host football games. With an original capacity of 32,500 people, the growing popularity of the team over the next few decades forced renovations that brought it to its current capacity. Of course, you can't talk about the rivalry between these two teams without bringing up some of its most iconic players and coaches. One of the greatest figures, not just in Packers history, but the NFL's history, came to the Packers in 1959 when Vince Lombardi was hired to bring a team that had been stuck in a rut of losing seasons back to their original glory. Lombardi was known for his temper, knowledge of the game, and strict discipline. Lombardi once said, quote, "After your football career is over with, you won't be able to open up a hot dog stand. People won't know who you are because you're in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You won't have a second career once this is over with, unless you listen to me. If you listen to me, we'll be winners, world champions, and you'll be household names, but only if you listen to me," end quote. The team would respond by winning 5 championships during his tenure as coach. Since 1960, the second year of Lombardi's tenure as coach, every Green Bay Packers home game, preseason, regular season, and playoffs included, has sold out. One game, there was a knock on the door of the Packers locker room, and it was George Halas, the Bears' owner, who asked if he could speak to Vince Lombardi, saying it was urgent. Lombardi came up to the door and asked, "Yeah, coach, what is it?" And he said, quote, "I just want you to know you better have your team ready because we're going to kick your ass," end quote. In the mid-1980s, the Bears had some of their greatest years in franchise history, as their teams, led by head coach Mike Ditka, became known for their defensive prowess. In the 1985 collision between the two teams, Ditka surprised the Packers by putting in 300-pound defensive lineman William the Refrigerator Perry as the fullback, who led the way for Bears running back Walter Payton to score multiple touchdowns during the contest. The game culminated in Perry running in for a short touchdown run, and the lore of the Fridge was born. The following year, Green Bay defenseman Charles Martin was seen wearing a towel on his waist that had a list of numbers of Chicago Bears players written on it, including Walter Payton, Bears quarterback Jim McMahon, and others, referred to as the hit list. Tensions boiled even further when later in the game, McMahon threw an interception, and after the play was over, Martin came up behind McMahon and body slammed him to the ground. McMahon separated his shoulder as a result of the play, and Martin was suspended for 2 games by the league, which at the time was the longest suspension ever doled out in league history. In the 1989 contest between the two teams, which infamously became known as the Instant Replay game, the Bears led for the duration of the game, but a furious Packers comeback culminated in a last-second game-winning touchdown pass by quarterback Don Majkowski to Shannon Sharp. However, it appeared that Majkowski had stepped over the line of scrimmage and received a penalty on the play. The call was sent to the instant replay official, who, after conferring for a while, determined that the touchdown was good, which sent the Packers to their first victory over the Bears in 5 years. Mike Ditka, infuriated by the call, ordered that the final score of the game have an asterisk next to it in all team publications with the words "Instant Replay Game" below it. In 1992, the Packers acquired Brett Favre, who proved to be the perfect fit for Green Bay as much of a country bumpkin as the team and state he represented. The Packers went 9-7 in his first year, which was only their second winning season in the previous 14 years. His second year, Green Bay made the playoffs for only the third time since winning a second consecutive Super Bowl in 1967. 3 years after that, Favre and the Packers won the Super Bowl. As Favre turned around the Packers franchise, so too did he reverse its fortunes in the rivalry with Chicago. The Bears beat Favre and the Packers in the first appearance of the rivalry, which was their 15th win in their 18 games against Green Bay. But a month later at Soldier Field, Favre and the Packers would beat the Bears to start a decade-long run of dominance. Favre and the Packers would win 20 of their next 23 games against Chicago. After Favre's retirement from the team in 2007, the new starting quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, continued this dominance over the Bears, which continues to this day, with a total record of 19-5 against the Bears. Despite this recent string of success, The Packers only hold a slight lead in the overall series as the Packers have 98 victories to the Bears' 95 victories. While both teams experienced a great deal of success in their earlier years, neither team has had a tremendous amount of success in winning championships during the Super Bowl era, as the Packers won the Super Bowl in 1996 with Brett Favre and 2010 with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, and the Bears' lone victory coming in 1985 behind their tremendous defense and consistent play. Despite this, both franchises boast some of the best moments year in and year out when playing one another, and are consistently in the hunt for divisional and playoff success. It's amazing when you realize that these teams have been playing against one another for almost 100 years, but what's not surprising is that these bordering state teams have always had the drive to best one another. From their earlier days, where the two teams almost single-handedly took home the championship year in and year out, to the Midtown Monster Bears teams of the 40s, the Vince Lombardi-led Packers teams that won throughout the 60s, the Mike Ditka-led Bears of the 80s, or the Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers-led Packers of the modern day, these two teams have provided a host of memories and excitement. Though the differences between Chicago and Green Bay are tremendous, demographically, the skill and penchants for winning are one and the same, which makes this rivalry one of the most legendary of all time. Thank you for listening to the Walking with Legends podcast. If you enjoy our content, please make sure to share our page on Facebook and spread the word. We look forward to continuing our Rivalries mini-series next week as we revisit the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry with new facts, games, and memories of this historic rivalry. Until next time, have a legendary week.